I'm going to speak about Afro-Cultural Identity and a simulation based model. The principal objective of the presentation is to show an initial multi-agent model about identity and from that model try to generate some conclusions about Afro-Cultural identity. Okay, the way I try to work today have four main points. The first one is identity as a means to analyze a cultural pattern, in which I try to explain why speak about identity. The second one is two identity biases, in which I try to review a little bit some biases in the review of the identity. The third one is bibliographical sources as a way to build the model. And finally, I try to show you the model, how does it work. Okay. The first step is to identify the model toward the analysis of a cultural pattern. This model is part of a large research project called Multiple Present at Crossroads, Afro-Culture at Latin American World and Spain. This research project is focused on Afro-cultural during the current globalization. This is between 1919 and 2008. In this case, globalization from my research project is understood as a cultural, economic, communicative, and social phenomena which imply new space, times, and complex symbolic intersections. In this project, I hope to describe some of those cultural paths which have been called Afro in particular settings, such as Colombia, Brazil, or Spain. For instance, new musical groups who base their work on the fusion of different rhythms like Afro and electrical ones, or writers who deals with texts that could be called unclassified. It's important to define the term identity as it relates to the Afro in complex space. Complex due to interaction, movement, and cultural confluence in many geographical locations and in different time periods. Therefore, it's vital to consider the identity discussion as the identity model in this case as a starting point to carry out the larger project. That is why today I'm going to show you the first attempt to conceptualize Afro-identity through computational tools, in this case, NetLaw. Okay, identity has been studied from several approaches, sociological, philosophical, psychological, etc. But in this preliminary demonstration, I want to focus on just two biases well known within the humanities field. The first is essentialist, could be called essentialist. The cultural quality is given as a natural element, and this first is related with race, language, and territory. Moreover, from that view, it could be considered as a natural feature of the human beings, which allows them to occupy a natural position within the cultural organization. That position is originated in the Hegelian tradition, or is based on that tradition, and has been embedded in the formation of national states in Latin America, probably used in there. The second one which consider identity as an outcome of hegemonic relationship between powerful and wakeful people, is based on a cultural position well known in North America called post-colonial vision, in which identity and cultural constructions are in position over minorities and dominant groups. Identity is seen as a process, as a discursive one, in which the symbolic domain is fundamental. Nonetheless, these approaches have seen the identity and the identified subjects as a passive, a flat surface in which nature and power are brought to bear. Despite of these human and cultural groups, like Afro in the case of my project, are active and base their identification on the mobility, interaction, and switch speed, among other things. Okay, in order to build the model, I developed some readings as a base to construct elements that allows simulate the behavior of Afro-cultural group. Identity formation in Afro-cultural history has been shown by historical texts as an active one. That is, the so-called Afro has been result of the forced mobility and therefore continues look for something lost. The enslaved human beings brought from Africa to Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, among other space, weren't just objects carried on the ships and settled down in the different space. On the contrary, they constructed and kept their own myths, beliefs, and rules, and incorporate new ones. That is the influence, and they were influenced and were influenced. They were moved and caused movement. This is what authors such as Equiano in the 16th century, Professor Bakpetu at the top of the list, or Gilroy in the 20th century, or Santana Pino and Thomas more recently in 21st century, in 21st century, show us. Okay, from that sources it's possible to summarize some features about Afro diaspora, African diaspora, and we have at least 4 features. Several ethnic and tribal groups. That is, when the conquerors arrive to Africa, Africa didn't unit, obviously. It's a wall of groups or ethnic groups and tribes which are interacting each other. The second one is the element that at this moment Africa, as we know it right now, that didn't exist. That is, African is an invention from the relationship between conquerors and other elements participating in this relationship. The second one is forcing migration to other parts of the world. That is the main feature of the African diaspora that allow Africa get the mobility. Okay, the mobility as a feature fundamental in which the people that are based on, and mobility in both sense, physical and symbolical, because people brought from Africa to different settings when are settling down, continue think about mobility and try to to get something lost. That is Africa. This Africa could be imaginary or could be physical. And three basic elements: temporal, spatial, and memory elements that are basic to understand the development of that culture.